Hello, listeners. Today is January 20th, and this is A Garden a Day with Maidenbrock Gardens. Well, if you are in the United States, you know today is Inauguration Day. Donald Trump will move back into the White House after being sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. I am not a political person, and this is not a political podcast, so don't worry about any of that in this episode. But there is a very pretty garden in Washington, D.C. that fits very well into being the garden we discuss today. So where are we going? We are going to the White House Rose Garden in Washington, District of Columbia. Washington, D.C. The White House Rose Garden is located near the Oval Office along the West Terrace and West Wing of the White House. Although it's become quite famous in recent decades, its use as a garden goes back more than a century. In earlier days, the garden was the location of the White House stables. By the late 1800s, several greenhouses were located on the spot. One of the greenhouses was called the Rose House. The area was cleared and became a formal garden in 1903 at the request of First Lady Edith Roosevelt, wife of 26th President Theodore Roosevelt. Her garden was a colonial-style garden, not yet the rose garden that we know today. Her garden included daisies, pansies, black-eyed Susans, and sweet peas. She also had a similar colonial-style garden installed on the east wing of the White House. Both of her gardens have been replaced. The first rose garden on the site was created in 1913 at the request of First Lady Ellen Wilson, the first First Lady of the 28th President Woodrow Wilson. She received assistance with the design of the garden by George Burnup, a landscape architect working for the Office of Public Buildings and Grounds in Washington, D.C. This first rose garden introduced the sharp rectangular shape of the garden that we see to this day. The rose garden as we know it today is often credited to First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, who oversaw its construction, but it was her husband, the 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, who had the idea to improve the garden. He wanted the garden to act as a stage for events and asked for functional steps to be installed near the Oval Office. The Kennedys hired Rachel Lambert Mellon, or Bunny Mellon, to design the garden, which was created in 1962. Her design removed beds from the center to create the wide lawn surrounded by symmetrical flower beds that remains to this day. A refresh and renovation of the Rose Garden was unveiled in 2020 by then and current First Lady Melania Trump. Her design removed crabapple trees and installed a 3-foot wide limestone walkway to make the garden accessible to visitors with disabilities. Although somewhat controversial at the time, the removal of the crabapple trees was done for practical purposes. The trees had grown too large and provided too much shade for sun-loving roses. The trees were replaced with white roses. Additional pink peace roses were also added to the garden. The garden also received a technical upgrade for audiovisual equipment and improved drainage. The Rose Garden has been used as a backdrop for many purposes through the years, even as an outdoor dining option for state dinners. The full garden covers only about a half of an acre and can accommodate 1,000 guests. The garden, even before it was the Rose Garden as we know it today, was used as a location for a good photo opportunity. 31st President Herbert Hoover was the first to use the garden for such activity. One of the most popular uses is as the location for press conferences and presidential announcements. 30th President Calvin Coolidge used the garden to announce policy decisions, and most, probably all, presidents have used the garden for such purposes ever since. The Rose Garden has also been used as a setting for hosting special guests and dignitaries, bill signing ceremonies, award presentations, and speeches. And of course, the garden is a pretty enough spot for a wedding. Tricia Nixon, daughter of President Richard Nixon, was married in the Rose Garden in 1971. Contrary to popular belief, the plantings in the Rose Garden change quite often and include more than just roses. Flowers in the garden are installed and removed to change with the seasons and with the personal preferences of each presidential administration. And of course, as with all things, plants don't live forever and sometimes need to be replaced. The garden includes bulbs, annuals, and perennials. Common flowers found in the rose garden are tulips, heliotrope, lilies, lady's mantle, cosmos, and chrysanthemums. Saucer magnolias anchor each corner of the garden. The garden is open to visitors only 2 times a year, usually April and October. Check with the National Park Service for ticket information if you're interested. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Join me tomorrow to see where we're going next. If you like A Garden a Day, please consider liking, following, or subscribing to the podcast. It lets you know when a new episode is available, and it lets me know you like the show. Also, if you are able, please consider giving the show a 5-star review. Thank you so much. If all goes well, I'll be right back here tomorrow. See you then.